My pregnant sister accused me of cheating at my graduation, her affair and secret baby exposed. I graduated from nursing school last Saturday, and my parents threw me a big party at their house, inviting all our extended family, friends from college, and neighbors. This was a huge achievement for our family since I'm the first person to get a degree, and they wanted to celebrate properly with everyone who supported me over the years. My sister Emily, who is 24 and 8 months pregnant, came with her husband Dennis, whom she's been married to for 3 years. I thought everything would go smoothly since she seemed genuinely happy for me when I told her about the party and even offered to help my mum with the decorations. Emily has always been the type of person who needs to be the center of attention in every situation. She's done things like announcing her engagement at our cousin's wedding reception, telling everyone about her pregnancy at our grandmother's 80th birthday party, and constantly posting dramatic social media updates about minor inconveniences. For sympathy and comments, the party was going really well. Everyone was congratulating me on finishing nursing school, asking about my job prospects, and sharing stories about their own experiences while we ate barbecue that my dad had been preparing since early morning and the cake my mum ordered from a fancy bakery downtown. I was talking to my college friends near the back patio when Emily suddenly stood up from her chair at the main table, where she had been sitting with Dennis. She walked toward our group with a determined expression that I recognized from previous dramatic episodes. She stopped right in front of me, pointed her finger directly at me, and announced loud enough for everyone at the party to hear that I had been flirting with her husband all evening, and trying to seduce him while she was pregnant and vulnerable. The entire party went silent, and all conversations stopped mid-sentence. Emily continued yelling that I was a horrible sister who couldn't stand to see her happy, and that I was jealous of her marriage, trying to ruin her family because I was bitter about being single and alone. I tried to tell her she was being ridiculous, and that I had barely spoken to Dennis, except to say hello when they arrived. But she kept interrupting me and getting louder while pointing dramatically and saying she saw me touching his arm and laughing at his jokes in a way that was clearly inappropriate. Dennis just stood there, looking shocked and uncomfortable, while everyone at the party stared at this scene unfolding. I could see my parents rushing over from across the yard with worried expressions, because they could hear Emily's voice carrying over all the background noise. I told Emily that she was making a scene over nothing, and that she needed to sit down and stop embarrassing herself and everyone else. But she kept going. She started crying while talking about how betrayed she felt, and how she couldn't trust anyone in her own family. Then, Dennis, too, had been completely silent this entire time, and just looking down at the ground while Emily was making her accusations, suddenly looked up and said that Emily was the one who had been cheating, and that the baby she was carrying probably wasn't even his. The entire party gasped, and Emily's face went completely white as Dennis continued talking. He revealed that he had found text messages on her phone 3 weeks ago from someone named Randall, whom she had been seeing behind his back for months. He stated that the timing of the pregnancy lined up with when she was having the affair. Emily immediately started screaming that Dennis was lying and trying to deflect attention from his own behavior. But Dennis pulled out his phone and started reading some of the text messages aloud, while Emily tried to grab the device from his hands. The messages were clearly romantic and sexual in nature, and mentioned meeting up at hotels when Dennis was working late shifts at his job. One of them specifically talked about Emily being worried about the pregnancy, and whether she should tell Dennis the truth about paternity. Emily was sobbing and screaming that the messages were taken out of context, and that Dennis was trying to humiliate her in front of our family. But Dennis kept reading more messages that made it clear she had been lying to him for months about where she was going and who she was spending time with. All the anger and frustration I had been holding back about Emily's attention-seeking behavior over the years just erupted, and I completely lost it. I lost my temper because Emily had ruined what was supposed to be my special day with her false accusations and drama. I stepped forward and shoved Emily hard enough that she stumbled backward. When she tried to steady herself against the table, I grabbed her shoulders and started shaking her while yelling that she was a selfish liar who Couldn't stand anyone else having a moment of happiness. Emily started hitting me back, and we ended up in a full physical fight right there in front of everyone at the party. Our relatives and friends stood around in shock. My dad and two of my uncles had to physically separate us while my mum cried and asked what was wrong with both of us. Emily was holding her pregnant belly and claiming that I was trying to hurt her baby, while I screamed that she had destroyed my graduation party with her lies and attention-seeking behavior. I never tried to hit her belly or anything like that. I was just angry and avoided the belly. Dennis just stood there, watching the whole fight without trying to help either of us. After my dad pulled me away from Emily, Dennis announced to everyone that he was leaving and that Emily could find her own way home because he was done with her lies and manipulation. He walked out of the party while Emily cried and begged him not to leave her. Then she turned to our parents and started demanding that they choose between supporting her or supporting me in this situation. The party basically ended after that, because everyone felt uncomfortable and didn't know what to say or do. Most of the guests left within the next 30 minutes, making polite excuses about having other obligations. My parents were devastated that my graduation celebration had turned into such a disaster, and they spent the rest of the evening trying to figure out what had happened and how things had escalated so quickly between Emily and me. Emily ended up calling her friend to come pick her up because Dennis had taken their car when he left, and she spent the entire time waiting for the ride, crying and saying that everyone was ganging up on her and that I had always been jealous of her life. I helped my parents clean up the decorations and leftover food from what should have been a happy celebration. I realize now that I overreacted in the moment. To provide some additional context about my relationship with Emily and the history of her attention-seeking behavior that led up to this incident at my graduation party, Emily and I have never had a particularly close relationship. She has always been the type of person who needs to be the center of attention in every situation, and this has caused problems at family events for as long as I can remember. When we were younger, she would do things like fake being sick on my birthday, so that our parents would focus on taking care of her instead of celebrating with me. She would also start crying and claim that other kids at school were bullying her whenever I brought friends over, ensuring that everyone comforted her instead of paying attention to my friendships. As we got older, Emily's behavior became more sophisticated and manipulative. She learned how to create drama at important moments in other people's lives to redirect focus back onto herself. For example, she announced her engagement at our cousin Megan's wedding reception by standing up during the speeches and showing off her ring, saying that Dennis had proposed to her that morning. This completely overshadowed Megan's special day and caused a lot of tension in our extended family. When our grandmother turned 80 last year, and our whole family gathered for a big celebration dinner at a nice restaurant, Emily waited until everyone was seated and the meal had been served before announcing that she was pregnant with her first child. She made this announcement by standing up and clinking her glass to get everyone's attention, and then she spent the rest of the evening talking about her pregnancy symptoms and due date, while our grandmother's birthday became secondary to Emily's news. Dennis has always been a quiet person who doesn't like confrontation or drama. He works as a mechanic at a local garage and keeps to himself, avoiding family disputes. That's why everyone at the party was so shocked when he finally spoke up and revealed the truth about Emily's affair. The reason I was so angry about Emily's false accusations at my graduation party wasn't just because they were lies, but because this was supposed to be my moment to celebrate a major achievement I had worked so hard for. After everything I'd been through over the past 2 years, it felt especially unfair. Nursing school was demanding, and I had to balance my studies with working part-time to cover my expenses, while living at home with my parents to save money on rent. I had struggled academically in high school, and never thought I would be able to handle college-level coursework. But I was determined to pursue nursing because I wanted a stable career that would allow me to help people and support myself financially. When I finally graduated and passed my licensing exam, it felt like I had accomplished something significant that proved I was capable of more than anyone had expected from me. My parents were incredibly proud of my achievement, because no one in our immediate family had ever graduated from college before. And they wanted to throw a big celebration to honor my success and thank all the people who had supported me throughout nursing school. They spent weeks planning the party and invited everyone who had been part of my journey. Emily understood how important this party was to me and our parents. And she also knew that her accusations about me flirting with Dennis were completely false. I had been focused on catching up with my college friends and relatives I hadn't seen in months. 4 days later, I had a long conversation with my parents about Emily's behavior at my graduation party and the years of attention-seeking incidents leading up to this situation. I told them that they bore some responsibility for what happened because they had always forced me to pretend we were a happy family, instead of addressing Emily's problematic behavior directly. My mom and dad had a philosophy that family conflicts should be kept private, presenting a united front to the outside world, regardless of what was happening behind closed doors. This meant that whenever Emily did something inappropriate or hurtful, they would tell me to ignore it and not make a big deal about it because family harmony was more important than individual feelings. When Emily announced her engagement at cousin Megan's wedding reception 3 years ago, my parents told me I was being petty for being upset and that I should be happy for my sister instead of focusing on the timing of her announcement. They said Megan wouldn't remember or care about this detail years from now, and that I was making the situation worse by bringing it up. After Emily announced her pregnancy at our grandmother's 80th birthday dinner last year, I tried to talk to my parents about how this pattern of behavior was hurtful and disrespectful to others, but they dismissed my concerns, saying that Emily was just excited about her milestones and wanted to share her happiness with the family. They told me I was being jealous and unsupportive and needed to work on being more generous and understanding toward my sister. I explained to my parents that their refusal to address Emily's attention-seeking behavior over the years had enabled her to escalate to the point where she felt comfortable making false accusations at my graduation party. Their approach of always prioritizing family peace over individual feelings had taught Emily that she could get away with inappropriate behavior as long as she framed it as sharing her happiness or being emotional. My dad initially tried to defend their parenting approach by saying they had always treated Emily and me equally, and that they couldn't control how their adult children chose to behave at family events. I pointed out that equal treatment doesn't mean ignoring problematic behavior, and their failure to set boundaries had directly contributed to the situation at my graduation party. I explained that Emily's false accusations weren't just hurtful to me personally, they had embarrassed our entire family in front of friends, neighbors, and extended relatives who came to celebrate my achievement, but instead witnessed the dramatic scene involving affairs, paternity questions, and a physical fight between sisters. I told them that some of these people might never feel comfortable attending future family events because of what they witnessed, and that Emily's behavior had damaged our family's reputation in the community. My mum started crying during this conversation and said she never realized how much Emily's behavior had affected me over the years. She thought I was just being competitive with my sister rather than genuinely hurt by her actions. She admitted that they had probably focused too much on avoiding conflict and maintaining the appearance of family unity without considering how their approach might be enabling Emily to continue behaving inappropriately. I told my parents that their apologies were appreciated, but I needed to see actual changes in how they handled Emily's behavior going forward. I informed my parents that I would not be attending any family events where Emily would be present, unless she publicly apologized to everyone who witnessed her false accusations and the drama that ensued at my graduation party. My dad asked what I meant by a public apology, and I explained that Emily needed to reach out to all the guests who attended the graduation party. She needed to acknowledge that her accusations against me were false, that she had created unnecessary drama during a celebration meant for my achievement, and that she was sorry for putting everyone in an uncomfortable position due to her personal issues. My parents discussed this privately for about an hour while I waited in the living room. When they returned, they told me that they had decided to ban Emily from all future family events until she completed the public apology I had requested. They said they would call Emily that evening to explain their decision and would also reach out to the extended family members who had been at the party to let them know they did not approve of Emily's behavior and that steps were being taken to address the situation. My mum also said she wanted to personally apologize to some of my college friends who had attended the party because she felt embarrassed that their first impression of our family had been so negative. She asked me for their contact information so she could send them a message explaining that Emily's behavior did not represent our family's values. My parents called Emily that evening while I was at work. According to my mum, the conversation did not go well because Emily immediately started crying, claiming that everyone was turning against her during the most vulnerable time in her life. Emily argued that she was 8 months pregnant and dealing with marital problems, insisting that the family should support her rather than punish her for having an emotional reaction at the party. She also claimed that Dennis had been acting suspicious and distant for weeks before the party, and that she genuinely believed I was flirting with him because of her insecurities and paranoia about her relationship. Emily maintained that her accusations were not meant to be malicious but was simply the result of pregnancy hormones and stress about her marriage, asserting that she should not be held responsible for Dennis's decision to reveal private information about their relationship. In front of everyone, my parents told Emily that they understood she was going through a difficult time, but that her behavior at the graduation party was unacceptable, regardless of her emotional state, and that she needed to take responsibility for her false accusations and the scene she had created. They explained that the family ban would remain in place until she completed the public apology, hoping she would use this time to reflect on her actions and work on repairing the relationships she had damaged. Emily hung up before the conversation ended and has not responded to any of their calls or text messages since, which is typical behavior for her when she does not get the reaction she wants from family members. A few days later, Dennis followed through on what he had said at my graduation party and demanded that Emily take a non-invasive prenatal paternity test to determine whether the baby she is carrying is actually his. The results came back yesterday, confirming that he is not the biological father of the child. Emily called our parents this morning in tears, saying that Dennis had kicked her out of their house and told her he was filing for divorce because he could not trust her anymore and refused to raise another man's child. According to Emily, Dennis had been cold and distant toward her ever since the graduation party incident and had been sleeping in their spare bedroom rather than in their bed while waiting for the paternity test results. When the results confirmed that the baby wasn't his, Dennis told Emily that he felt completely betrayed and manipulated and could not continue their marriage, knowing she had been lying to him about the affair and the pregnancy for months. Emily is now 38 weeks pregnant and could give birth at any time. She has nowhere to go because she does not have enough money saved for her own apartment, and most of her friends have distanced themselves from her since word about the affair and false accusations spread through our social circle. She called our parents, crying and begging them to let her move back into their house temporarily until she can figure out a more permanent living situation after the baby is born. My parents were conflicted about what to do. They had just banned Emily from family events until she apologized for her behavior at the graduation party, but they also did not want to leave their pregnant daughter homeless during the final weeks of her pregnancy. I was asked how I felt about Emily living in their house again, and whether I thought it would interfere with our relationship and my willingness to visit them. I told my parents that despite our current feud and my anger over the graduation party incident, I didn't believe an innocent baby should suffer because of Emily's poor decisions and behavior. I suggested they allow her to move back home temporarily to ensure she has a safe place to give birth and recover. I explained that my issue was with Emily's attention-seeking behavior and false accusations, not with her unborn child. I felt I could separate my feelings about her from my concern for the baby's welfare. I made it clear to my parents that I expected them to maintain some boundaries with Emily, even if they let her move back home. I insisted that she still needed to complete a public apology for her behavior at the graduation party before I would be willing to have any direct contact with her. I also warned them that if Emily tried to use her pregnancy and homelessness to manipulate them into dropping the consequences for her actions, I would reconsider my advice about letting her stay in their house. My parents agreed to let Emily move back home with the understanding that this was a temporary arrangement focused on ensuring the baby's safety and health, and that it didn't mean they were excusing or forgetting her behavior at the graduation party. They called Emily back and told her she could stay in her old bedroom until 6 weeks after the baby was born, which would give her time to recover from childbirth and start looking for a more permanent living situation. Emily moved back into our parents' house yesterday with just 4 suitcases of clothes and some basic personal items, as Dennis had told her to leave immediately and hadn't given her time to pack properly. According to my mum, Emily has been crying almost constantly since her arrival, claiming that her life has fallen apart and that everyone has turned against her. When she needs support the most, Dennis apparently told Emily that he would continue paying for her prenatal medical expenses and the cost of delivery since they are still legally married. However, he made it clear that he wouldn't provide any financial support for the baby after her birth because he is not the biological father. He also insisted that Emily remove all her belongings from their house within the next 2 weeks, stating that he would be changing the locks and filing for divorce as soon as possible. Emily has been trying to contact the biological father of her baby, who is reportedly the Randall person mentioned in the text messages Dennis read at my graduation party. However, according to my mum, Randall has been ignoring her calls and messages since he learned about the pregnancy. Emily told our parents that Randall is married with 2 children of his own, and had made it clear during their affair that he wasn't planning to leave his wife or take responsibility for the consequences of their relationship. My parents are feeling overwhelmed by having Emily back in the house because she requires a lot of emotional support and attention while dealing with the divorce, the approaching birth, and her uncertain future as a single mother. My mum said that Emily has been monopolizing their time with constant conversations about her problems and fears, asking them to make decisions for her about finding a lawyer, choosing a pediatrician, and applying for government assistance programs. I have been staying away from my parents' house while Emily is living there because I'm not ready to interact with her yet, and I don't want to create additional stress for my parents, who are already dealing with a difficult situation. I've been calling my mum every few days to check on how things are going, and to offer practical advice about resources that might help Emily transition to independent living after the baby is born. Final update. 1 year later, it's been a full year since the graduation party incident that destroyed my relationship with Emily and exposed her affair and pregnancy lies. I wanted to provide a final update on how everything has played out for our family and what the current situation looks like now that the dust has settled. Emily gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Grace 3 weeks after she moved back in with her parents, and the delivery went smoothly despite all the stress and drama surrounding the pregnancy. Dennis came to the hospital when Emily went into labor because they were still legally married and he wanted to ensure she had support during the birth. However, he made it clear that this was the extent of his involvement and that he would not be taking any parental role with the baby. The divorce between Emily and Dennis was finalized about 8 months ago. The lengthy process of dividing shared assets and determining spousal support payments ultimately resulted in Dennis keeping the house while Emily received a small settlement. She used this money to pay her legal fees and start a college fund for Grace. Despite the circumstances, Dennis has been decent throughout the situation and didn't try to complicate the divorce further, even though he had every right to feel bitter about Emily's lies and betrayal. Emily never completed the public apology that my parents required before she could attend family events again. As a result, she has essentially been living as a permanent resident in our parents' house, rather than finding her own place and establishing independence as a single mother. My parents applied for and received legal custody of Grace when it became clear that Emily was struggling with depression and wasn't fully capable of caring for a newborn on her own. They have essentially become Grace's primary caregivers while Emily works part-time at a retail job. The biological father, Randall, has refused to acknowledge paternity or provide any financial support for Grace. For the past 6 months, Emily has been working with a family court attorney to compel him to take a paternity test and pay child support. However, Randall hired his own lawyer and has been fighting the paternity claim because he doesn't want his wife to find out about the affair. He is also concerned about how child support payments would affect his existing family's finances. Even if Emily wins the case and receives child support, the amount may not be enough for her to afford her own apartment and childcare while working full time. My relationship with Emily has remained strained and distant throughout this past year. She never apologized for her false accusations at my graduation party, or acknowledged that her behavior was inappropriate and hurtful. We've only spoken directly a few times when I've been visiting my parents, and she's been in the same room. These interactions have been polite but cold, with no real effort to address the underlying issues between us. Emily seems to have convinced herself that everyone overreacted to what happened at the graduation party, and that she was the real victim in the situation because she lost her marriage and ended up as a single mother with limited resources. My parents have been struggling with the financial and emotional burden of supporting Emily and Grace. They have aged significantly over the past year from the stress of essentially starting over as parents in their late 50s. They loved Grace and are committed to providing her with a stable home environment, but they've privately admitted to me that they're worried about their ability to handle the demands of raising a child, while also managing their own health issues and retirement planning. I've tried to help my parents by babysitting Grace occasionally and contributing money for baby supplies and expenses, but I've maintained my boundary about not having a close relationship with Emily. Grace is an innocent child who deserves love and support from her extended family, but I refuse to pretend that Emily's actions were acceptable just because time has passed.